Yoshiko. Now I must apologize. My Japanese is terrible, so I'll switch to English and stick to English. Don't worry. It's fine like this. So thank you for being here, first of all. It's great to be back in Tokyo after such a long time. First question, why are we here? So if we look around, there's people here from Italy, India, Japan, of course, Colombia, Spain, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Vietnam, and I hope I didn't leave anybody out. Italy, of course. Why are we all here? Because we all share the same passion. We all have blue in our veins. If you cut me, I probably bleed blue and not red. Because we have this joint passion and love for a product that is as unique as it is universal. I particularly love the fact that the Japanese word for blue or indigo is the same word as you use for love. So I means both blue, indigo, or love. And I think this is something that we all share, and we have shared for a very long time. And we all know it, we all love it. We all wonder once in a while where it came from, when was it invented, who do we have to thank for this? So where and when was this beautiful stuff invented? Well, the urban legend, the story that we all hear is that it came from Nîmes in France. Because they say, well, it's denim, and it means denim, coming from denim. That is a theory that I never fully embraced for a number of reasons. The one reason is that even though Nîmes had a very strong tradition in textiles, it was mostly a tradition around wool and silk, and not so much around cotton or indigo. So it's really mostly about the construction. The traditional denim is a 3x1 construction, which is commonly known as a serge de Nîmes, which is the area where this construction was famous. But it's like saying that corduroy, which means corde du roi, the cord of the king, would be invented by a king. It's obviously nonsense. So let's keep that in mind. I put a few pictures here to show what other options are there. So first is the beautiful city of Nîmes. Then we have an indigo pit. This picture was taken in Africa, in the center of Africa. But this is familiar in many, many regions around the world. Indigo has been dyed like this for thousands of years. In Africa, in India, in China, in Japan, in South America, in North America. So this is something that is definitely not coming from Nîmes. And the same technique has been used for thousands of years. So next, traditional African textiles. So indigo in construction that is not denim, but is very close to what we consider denim. And again, this has been done for hundreds of years. The next one is really interesting. That's a chief blanket, and it's from Native American chief, so what we call, erroneously called Indians. So the North American native tribes were using indigo for thousands of years to dye their textiles. Another fascinating story. This was a painting by an Italian painter. We don't know the name. It's from around 1700. And the incredible thing is that he was painting regular people wearing garments that were obviously made of denim. And we're looking at over 300 years ago, long before denim became part of what we know now. And he was even using indigo as the dye for the painting. That's 300 years ago. Let's go even farther back. 6,000 years ago. This piece of textile is the oldest piece of textile that we know of that shows a cotton fabric dyed in indigo. So this goes way back. So we know that indigo and cotton have been part of our tradition for thousands of years. Finally, on the other side of the world, a family from a fisherman village in India, near Mumbai. It was a small village called Duga. Sorry if I butchered the name. But the story was that the fishermen were wearing these blue pants which was obviously dyed in indigo. And interestingly, the name Dangari is actually coming from Duga, from that village in Mumbai. So the answer to the question is nobody knows. If I had to make one guess after years of research, I would assume that the earlier denims came actually from northern England, where there was a really strong textile tradition, where they had the largest cotton spinners in the world, and where they had access to indigo because of their occupation of India. Of course, when we think denim, we think of the fabric of America. That's what we all know. And it is a fact. And this is where it started. This is the biggest textile operation in the world that nobody knows. And I discovered this by accident, the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company. I was in the archives at Levi's one day, going over some really old catalogs from the 1800s. And back in those days, when they were advertising items of clothing, they used to put the name of the fabric supplier. It was like a guarantee of quality. So I look at the old advertising of the very early Levi's pants, and it said, made with Amoskeag XX 8-ounce denim or 9-ounce denim. I was absolutely blown away because I had never heard the name before. And I was trying to figure out who this Amoskeag was. I thought maybe it's one of the current mills that changed name over time. But then as I started doing more and more research, I realized that it was a mill that had existed for 100 years and then completely disappeared. So somebody came over from England, and they landed in what we call New England now, the area near what is today Manchester in New England. And they found an area where there was a river, so they could have a source of energy, and it was by the Amoskeag Falls, and that's where the name Amoskeag came for the mill too. So this was around 1830. The first mill became 2 mills, 3 mills, 4 mills. A whole city was built around the textile mill, and the city was even called Manchester because it was basically created after the Manchester in England. They were making all kinds of fabrics, but they were also making denim. They were the first suppliers of denim to Levi's, as we said. And so in my obsession to find out more about them, I went to visit the area. And the old mills are still there. Of course, there's no textiles there. But I went to the library, to the local library, and I was lucky enough to find some of the old textile books back from the mill. And in these books, there were swatches of fabrics with annotations and production notes. And I learned something that was really interesting, which again proves my theory that denim did not come from Nîmes. One thing, the skilled workers who were hired to work in this mill and who were coming from Europe were coming mostly from Scotland and northern England. There were also Italians, Germans, Portuguese, but it was mostly people from the north of England because they knew how to make this fabric. And the second thing was that I found 2 swatches of an indigo dyed fabric, and one was described as denim, and it was our traditional 3x1 construction, and the other one was named jeans, and it was a 2x1 construction. So the other theory that the name of our jeans comes from Genoa is because that was the fabric that was used mostly by sailors and by the Navy. Of course, it's thanks to these guys that Mr. Levi Strauss, when he emigrated from, when he came from New York to San Francisco to start his business, started using these fabrics from this mill. Actually, the very first pants that he made were not even made with indigo. They were made with a canvas, with a duck cloth, similar to what Carhartt would use now. He switched to indigo denim. I have no idea why. I don't know if it was cheaper, more durable, if people liked it more comfortable, whatever. But that's the reason, and this is why we now wear this stuff. And when you think blue jeans, of course, there's one name that comes to mind.
Levi's 501.
All jeans, bar none, are basically evolutions of the old 501, and so you try to tweak it, you change your fit a little bit, you change all the trim and the accessories and all the stuff that you can put on top of the jeans. but the basic pant is still the same.
It's the best-selling jean of all time. It spans more than 5 generations.
That's the quintessential jean, the 501, which incidentally was not called jean until much later, when somebody in marketing in Levi's decided that high-waisted overall was not a very sexy name for the pants, so they decided to call them jeans. Originally, they were called high-waisted overalls. They were made with Amos denim. The first picture is one of the oldest Levi's pants, the old 501 and XX that could be found. We acquired it at Levi's. We paid over $50,000 for them, and then we had to reproduce them for our LVC line. One connection with Japan, the fabric that I developed it with Kurabo in Japan, because we wanted to reproduce exactly the same look and feel of the original Amos denim. And I worked very closely with the team at Kurabo here in Japan to recreate it. And as you can imagine, it was not an easy task, because we were starting from something like that. We could not take him out of the archives. Those things are kept in a vault. I could not just send them over to the mill and say, just copy this. I could not cut a swatch, obviously. And so I had to spend a lot of time there at the archives, studying the construction, trying to figure out what the original construction was, studying the shade, because we had to try to come as close as possible to the original shade. And I had to describe it, basically, to our friends in Japan. Fabric came out beautiful. I think it's one of the nicest, not because I was part of the creation, but it's one of the nicest denims that I've seen in my life, contemporary denims. It's KDX 418, in case you were wondering. Of course, Levi's was not the only one. There were many people making blue pants at the time. And interestingly, many of the competition was also putting the arcuate on the pocket. So they were all making very similar pants. Levi's was obviously the first one to patent the rivet to strengthen the construction. And they were then the first one to patent the arcuate, so they stopped everybody else from doing it, and the red tab on the pocket. As denim transitioned from purely workwear to also fashion or something that everyday people would wear, its popularity started to grow enormously. Levi's became a phenomenon. The 501 became super famous. It was in the movies. It was worn by rock stars, by everybody. When after the war, the American army came to Europe and to Japan and to Korea, the GIs were always wearing blue jeans in their free time. And the local people really wanted those pants. So there was a great interest in those jeans. So let's say return to Europe. Started in Europe, developed in the US, came back to Europe. The Europeans decided to give it a little more flavor and to embrace more the fashion aspect of the denim. It had been used in workwear in Europe too, but I think the vast majority was used in fashion. And there were denim mills in Spain, in Italy, in Greece, in Belgium, in France, in England, in Germany, everywhere. But like I said, it was mostly a fashion thing. Another connection with Japan here, Replay is the one that introduced Japanese denim to Europe. Even in Japan, like I said, people started to see American movies, to see participate in American music, and see the GIs wearing the pants. And so some factories, some companies started to produce jeans in Japan too. At the time, they were all importing the fabric from the US, and they were trying to make the perfect American jeans. Does anybody know what this means? KD8.
この KD8 って意味わかる方いらっしゃいますか？
1972, 1973, a mill in the Kojima area decided that they wanted to develop the fabric. There was obviously a very old tradition here in Japan dyeing indigo, but there was no denim per se. So KD8 was number 8 attempt that Kurabo produced before they decided that it was good enough for the market. And that's where another very interesting chapter started. The Japanese took a different approach from what the Europeans did or the Americans did. The Japanese decided to go for the the root, the soul of the original product. So they try to replicate and reproduce exactly denim as the way it was when it was made in North America. And even in the garment construction, they decided to be very faithful to what the most famous American brands were, so the Levi's, Wrangler, and Lee. So with an incredible attention to detail that is only possible in this country, a number of fantastic brands came out. They were born. We know the Osaka Five, the famous 5 brands that developed from the area around Osaka. We know other brands that are famous worldwide, like 45 RPM, like Capital. My apologies if I cannot list all of them because there's too many. The common thread is that they all make a phenomenally beautiful product. Where will the journey take us? We see that it started in Europe, probably, developed in North America, developed in Japan, developed, of course, in other parts of Asia. With time, a lot of changes came. Denim production in North America is virtually disappeared. There's only 1 or 2 mills. It's basically gone. There is still production in Mexico, in South America, of course, but the traditional American denim mills are gone. Europe, same story. Gone in Spain, Belgium, France, England, Germany, Greece, all gone. There's nothing left. The only ones that are still surviving are just 2 or 3 in Italy, and let's hope that they manage to survive. And the whole business moved. It moved with globalization. It moved with the constant search for more affordable production places. And so it developed greatly in areas like Southeast Asia. India, when I started traveling to India, there were 3 denim mills. Now there's 53. It's the 2nd largest denim producer in the world after China. China was obviously the number 1, although it's slowly coming down. Pakistan has developed incredibly. Bangladesh, same story. Vietnam is coming on strong. So it's moving, but the common thing is that we're still making denim using indigo, using cotton, and using very similar traditional constructions. Where is the future going to take us? We have no idea. We know that it's evolving. In parts of the world, like in Japan, it's going to probably stay very close to its roots, to its origins. In other parts, it will probably evolve into something completely different. The only thing that I know is that in the foreseeable future, we will all be still wearing these fantastic blue jeans.